So today I'm going to give a brief analysis of a video that was made by Basu Ghosh, Krishna Kirti, and Sridhar Srinivasam. And this is the ISKCON India Scholars Board making this video. Now, one of the points Basu Ghosh makes right out of the gate is that Krishna consciousness is spreading like wildfire and it cannot be checked, quoting a letter from Prabhupada. Well, right now it is not spreading like wildfire. It has basically become a Hindu operation. All of the ISKCON temples in America are full of Hindus on Sunday, and during the week the temple is basically a ghost town. There's hardly anybody there. So it is no longer spreading like wildfire because people are rejecting these GBC gurus. They do not accept that these gurus are bona fide. So the religion is being converted into a Hindu operation, which is very visible. Just look at photos of the people in the temples on Sunday. It's Hindus. And Prabhupada warned us about this many, many times. Do not allow my movement to become taken over by the Hindus because it will become a business. And he said many negative things about the Hindus when we were in India. He just didn't appreciate or approve very much of the Hindus. Now, I have a good friend who works at a ISKCON temple on the East Coast, and he says the temple is basically all Hindus in the congregation. Hindus are on the management board, and Hindus are doing the puja and everything else. There are very few Western people participating in that temple. But he said one thing a lot of people do not realize is that half of these Hindus, or more than half, 50%, maybe more, also are meat eaters. They're not even vegetarians. So he confronted one of the Hindu managers, why are there so many meat-eating people in and around this temple? Some of them are taking up positions on the management board. And he was told only the pujaris need to be vegetarians. So the movement is not spreading like wildfire. It is in a very diminished condition. The temples have very few people, especially very few Western people. And Prabhupada, his whole idea was to make Western people into Vaishnavas. That was his whole process and idea. And he said the Hindus are hodgepodge, and I spent 40 years preaching to the Hindus, and it was a waste of time because they already know everything. That's what he told me. He said the Hindus already know everything. So he was not a fan of the Hindus. So now the Hindus are taking over. That means their system has failed in the main operation that Prabhupada wanted to do, which was to preach to the Western people. Now, if you notice, the title of their video is, Did Ritvikism Win in Court? Ritvikism means people who worship pure devotees. The Ritviks worship a pure devotee, and they do not worship a conditioned soul. They worship a pure devotee as the guru. So it's very misleading to ask the question, did worshiping a pure devotee win in court? Of course, worshipping a pure devotee wins every time, everywhere, in court, out of court. There is no alternative to worshipping a pure devotee. So when they say Ritvikism, it's a code word for saying worshipping a pure devotee. Did it win? Well, of course it wins. Because if you're not worshipping a pure devotee, you're not going back to Godhead. You have to worship a person who is situated in Godhead. Now, according to the India Scholars Board, we have to worship their conditioned soul gurus, and Jaitartha says their conditioned soul gurus are found falling into illicit sex with men, women, and possibly children as well. Of course, we know they have had sex with minors, some of these gurus. So should we worship a pure devotee, or should we worship a conditioned soul? And conditioned souls who are falling into illicit sex with men, women, and children, what would you rather worship? Well, in America, People are not going to worship a guru chain of gurus where a number of the members of the chain are falling into illicit sex with men, women, and children. That's just not acceptable in the Western world. Now, one of these scholars from this board, the ICC Scholars Board, wrote to tell me, I cannot understand why it is necessary to worship conditioned souls because I'm a malecha. Malecha means a Western low-born person. Well, wait a minute. So I'm a low-born person. I can't understand that it's a good idea to worship illicit sex with men, women, and children guru program? Really? Well, then that's a blessing. I'd rather be a malecha and know what should be worshipped and what should not be worshipped. Then they misquote B.V. Puri Maharaj by saying he did not endorse the idea of worshiping a pure devotee. He said that's like the Christian idea. Well, Prabhupada said worshiping Jesus is bona fide. The system of worshiping Jesus through the priests and the church is bona fide, and he's the acharya for the religion. Prabhupada also said, when we were in India, that Jesus is still accepting the sins of followers now, even though 2,000 years has passed. So we shouldn't worship Jesus. That's a bad idea. We should worship the GBC's illicit sex with men, women, and children guru parampara. Well, okay, well, wait a minute. How is worshiping illicit sex with men, women, and children superior to worshiping a pure devotee? I just have no idea where that's coming from. But B.V. Puri did say that Prabhupada had only made a Ritvik system. He didn't see anyone qualified to be guru in his program, so he only made a system of proxies. B.V. Puri does confirm that the Ritvik order is the order that Prabhupada wanted. And he told B.V. Puri, this is what I have ordered for my society. They will be Ritviks. They will not be gurus. They're not qualified. Okay, so they're misquoting B.V. Puri and taking his statements out of context. Unfortunately, B.V. Puri later on promoted Radhanath, who is one of the GBC gurus, and Radhanath is credited with being Kirtanananda's hatchet man, and allegedly he paid to have Sulochan taken out because Sulochan was criticizing the worship of homosexuals and pedophiles. But Radhanath also helped bury Kirtanananda in a samadhi later on. So we're burying homosexuals and pedophiles in samadhis, and that's a good idea. We should have children come and worship a homosexual pedophile in a samadhi, but we can't have anybody worshiping Jesus. That's a bad idea. Well, okay. That will never work in the West. You can't tell people that a homosexual pedophile samadhi program is superior to worshiping Jesus. That will never fly in the West. Now, in 1990, the GBC had a quote-unquote Ritvik debate, and I was invited to go to the Ritvik debate, but when I saw the rules, which is you will not be allowed to discuss the history or activities of the GBC gurus, I said, this is a kangaroo court. We're not allowed to discuss the activities of these gurus because so many deviations are going on with these gurus. So that would be like saying, we're going to make Al Capone a saint in the Catholic Church, but we cannot discuss the activities of Al Capone. So maybe we should review a little history of the India Continental Committee or India Shastra Advisory Group or whatever they call themselves. Resident of Vaikuntha Acharya. Let's see what a resident of Vaikuntha does according to the India Continental Committee Bureau. Well, let's start with Haduda. Haduda was arrested for having a machine gun in the trunk of his car, and his people were stealing credit cards and they were selling illegal guns. Haduda was taking percodons, drinking vodka, drinking peppermint schnapps, drinking beer, And he had a big pile of beer cans out in front of his cottage, and he would come out and blast the beer cans with a shotgun every once in a while and blow all the cans all over the place. A little girl had her hand up in the air, and a bullet went through her hand, which was just randomly being shot around the farm of Haduda. So there was guns, and there was crazy criminal activities going on, stealing credit cards, and the farm was raided by the federal marshals, and they found all kinds of stolen properties. And the story was in all of the newspapers. Machine Gun Swami. So this is the result of the GBC promoting false acharyas. He's a Swami, he's a machine gun Swami. So, but things just got worse after that. The GBC did not come and fix the problem. They didn't get rid of Haduda, and so later he was shooting guns at occupied buildings in downtown Berkeley. There was people inside the buildings. Haduda was shooting out the windows of the buildings. The people were laying on the floor. They were terrified. He blew out the windows of a big car dealership, which are giant windows that cost a lot of money. He's just driving around downtown Berkeley shooting at windows and shooting at occupied buildings, terrifying the citizens. And he's the sum total of the demigods. He's the Messiah of the Jagat. He's the Emperor of Kirtan. All these different things that he was being advertised as. And basically he was just a criminal. Then, after all that, one of the husbands of the woman Haduda was having sex with, he was having sex with at least half a dozen women, okay? So one of the husbands had a shotgun. He was in the temple, and he told me he was going to go and blow Haduda's head off with a shotgun because Haduda was having sex with this guy's wife. So I had to restrain this guy and convince him not to go kill Haduda. So I had to save Haduda's life, all right? And then as a thank you from Haduda, after I saved his life, he sent 3 Gundas from West Virginia to come and kill me. And the FBI informed me that these people are coming to kill you. So they put undercover surveillance on me, and those Gundas were chasing me down the street. The police all came out of their undercover cars and arrested those guys. So basically the guru program of the India ICC Bureau is trying to get me whacked. That's what's going on here. Now Jaitartha, another guy that was the sum total of the demigods, a guru, an acharya, a representative of God. Well, he became the biggest distributor of designer drugs in the United Kingdom. And I tried to say he's not a guru in 1979. And a gang of 4 gurus kicked me out of ISKCON. I got kicked out for objecting to having illicit sex and drugs gurus. I had to go, and he gets to stay. And they told me that. They said, he's a guru because we said he's a guru. We who? We, the India ICC Bureau type guys, said so. Well, he's not a guru, I'm sorry. He's having sex with a follower. He's taking drugs. And he's just behaving like a fool. He's sitting on a seat, yelling, screaming, shouting, and chanting really crazy kirtans, because he's intoxicated while he's sitting on his guru seat. And we all knew that. So how is this guy a guru? And so then later on, Jaitartha's gang all comes to Berkeley. I'm sitting in front of the temple, and the followers of Jaitartha said, there's Paranjan, let's tear him up. And they would have torn me up, except a couple guys came out of the temple, and those guys had guns. So they chased away the Jaitartha people. Otherwise, I would have been torn to shreds on the spot by the Jaitartha people. So what's going on here? It seems like the India ICC people are trying to basically have me taken off the face of the earth. I mean, really. So this is just another example of one of their quote-unquote messiahs from heaven and residents of Krishna Loka and all the rest of it. So This guy is not a guru, was not a guru, could not have been a guru. He was a deviant. Now, one of the things that I said in 1979 when I objected to Jaitartha, I quoted Srila Prabhupada saying that when a guru is having sex with a follower, it is the same as a father having sex with his own daughter. In other words, it is a pedophile relationship. So I said, if we are worshiping a pedophile, you become what you worship, and we will have more and more pedophiles in ISKCON if we worship pedophiles. And they thought that was a ridiculous argument. Well, it turned out to be quite true. ISKCON then became infiltrated with many, many, many pedophiles, so many pedophiles that evidently, supposedly, allegedly, several thousand children were molested in ISKCON. And then I had to have ISKCON sued for $400 million for mass child molesting. And ISKCON pleaded no contest in the court because they could not dispute the fact that children were being molested left, right, and center in their society. So this is the result of worshipping deviants. You will attract more deviants, and that is exactly what happened, which was very predictable. So you can't worship pedophiles and expect a good result. And then Kirtananda, another one of their gurus, was having oral sex with boys in his motorhome. Another pedophile, another big guru in their system. And then, after we know he's a homosexual pedophile, then ISKCON buries Kirtananda in a samadhi, or they help having him buried. People like Gopal Krishna, the temple president of ISKCON Vrindavan, Radhanath, etc., they are attending the ceremony to bury Kirtananda in a samadhi. So it's okay to worship a homosexual pedophile in a samadhi, but it's not okay to worship a pure devotee like Prabhupada, because then we would be like the Christians. So homosexual pedophile worship is fine. Worshipping Jesus is not fine. Well, that's just, again, not going to fly. It's just not going to fly. People are not interested in worshiping pedophiles and deviants in a samadhi or a program that is promoting and orchestrating all that. It's just not going to work. Then Bhavananda is having oral sex with taxi drivers in the Holy Dham. That's all known and discussed at the GBC meeting. And what is the result? They reinstate Bhavananda as Vishnu Pad. Vishnu Pad is having oral sex with taxi drivers. Well, how's that going to work? So Vishnu is God. Vishnu Pad means, he's as good as the feet of God. And he's a homosexual having oral sex in the Holy Land. So, wait, how is that guy a guru? So we cannot worship Jesus, but we can worship a guy who's having oral sex with taxi drivers. And he is as good as God. Well, I'm sorry to have to report this, but if you stop the average hamburger-eating citizen here in San Francisco and ask him if a guy who's having oral sex with taxi drivers in the Holy Land is as good as God, he's going to say, no. That means the average hamburger-eating person is much more advanced than these India ICC Bureau guys all put together. Then I got into a debate with this Sridhar Srinivasa guy, the big scholar there, and I asked him, why is the GBC promoting illicit sex with man, woman, and children as acharyas, as Krishna's successors? And he just blocked me, and he is a follower of Bhakti Vikas Swami. Bhakti Vikas Swami is one of the people who went against me when I said we got to get rid of Jaitartha. He sided with the people who kept Jaitartha in the Guru's seat. We need to have some guy who's having illicit sex and he's offering LSD to the shalagram in the Guru's seat. So that means they don't know what a Guru is. Now, around 1984, me and Jaitartha met just by chance. I was at Atreya Rishi's house. Jaitartha was coming down the stairs. I was going up the stairs. And it was a very tense situation. He knew I'm against his program. But when I went past him, my life air was just totally sucked out of my body. Just, I just couldn't breathe. And then I thought about that for a second, and I realized, wow, Jaitartha is just surrounded by a huge ball of sins. And I felt that big ball of sins as I went past him. So this is another whole issue. How are these guys qualified to take sins? Yeah, we can't worship Jesus. Okay, we're going to give the sins to Jaitartha. Well, what's going to happen to Jaitartha? He's going to be overwhelmed. He cannot absorb sins. He doesn't have the capacity to do that. So they are just burdening up these people with sins. Look at Jayapataka. Just look at the guy. So when we met, me and Jayapataka and Jaitartha, I told them, you guys are not qualified to take sins. And Prabhupada said that. Do not let people touch your feet because you'll be taking sins and you'll be overwhelmed. You'll get sick, fall down, or both. Of course, a lot of them just died prematurely. Well, Jayapataka and Jaitartha just laughed and thought I was just making a hysterical joke. But look what happened to both of them. Jayapataka suffered horribly. Jaitartha got his head chopped off. I mean, seriously, they were not qualified to take sins. Look at Satsarup. He's got headaches all the time. He writes that I am the guru of pills because he's taking all kinds of psychotropic medications to cure his headaches. And he goes to a psychic to see if the psychic can give him advice on his headaches, and the psychic just stops Satsarup before he gets close to the psychic and says, "Don't get near me, sir. You are covered with a giant black ball of dark energy." Yeah, you are covered with sins. You're taking sins from all these people, and it's covering you, and it's making you have headaches and get sick and all the rest of it. So they're not qualified to take sins, and Prabhupada told us that repeatedly. You guys cannot take sins. So this is just another whole thing that never gets discussed. How are these people qualified to take sins? And after Jayapataka had his stroke, his followers were writing, "Oh, our Guru Maharaj is sick because he has taken our sins. So he's suffering from taking our sins." Well, that's true. But he's not authorized to take sins. He is not another Jesus. So, Srila Prabhupada says Jesus is still taking the sins of his sincere followers, and now these guys are not on that level. So, we keep hearing this argument that the Ritvik idea, worshipping a pure devotee, is not found in the scriptures. Okay. Worshipping a pure devotee is never found in the scriptures. What? Sorry, that's the only thing you're going to find in the scriptures. You have to worship a pure devotee. You can't worship a impure person. That is never found in any of the Vedic scriptures. There's no recommendation to worship conditioned souls and sinful people found in the Vedas. It is simply not existing anywhere. But there's one thing that Prabhupada repeatedly says, Guru su naramati narakasa, anyone who thinks Guru is an ordinary man is destined to go to hell. Or actually, he's already in hell. Prabhupada said that. He's already in hell if he thinks Guru is an ordinary man. But when it comes to ISKCON leaders, the governing body commission and their ICC bureau and all the rest of these guys, they cannot even find an ordinary man to be their guru. They find degraded people who are having illicit sex with men, women, and children. They're taking intoxicants. They're orchestrating murders and crimes and all kinds of things. The more deviated a person is, the more likely he is to be selected as one of the messiahs of the GBC program. Very degraded people are being selected as their successors to God. Why don't they find a nice ordinary person? Like my local town butcher. I mean, he would be a better guru than their gurus because he's not engaged in illicit sex with men, women, and children. He's not orchestrating the murders of Vaishnavas. He's not a criminal posing as a pure devotee. So he has better qualities than their gurus. Starting around 1984, the GBC guru people started to put together their guru reform. They understood that people were objecting to their whole system, so they started to repackage their whole program as being fixed in reform. And so Satsvarup, with the help of Narayan Maharaj and others, wrote the Guru Reform Notebook. So they were going to reform their gurus, but this begs the question, what kind of a guru needs reform in the first place? So these people are having illicit sex with men, women, and children, and they need to be reformed. Okay, that's not the system. You, first of all, reform yourself, then you're a guru. You don't become a guru and then reform yourself after the fact. That's just not how the system works. You're a reformed person, then you're a guru. So they put the cart before the horse here. But this begs the question, how can people who are engaged in illicit sex with men, women, and children, 2/3 show of hands, vote in more gurus? I mean, this doesn't make sense either. So the reformers voted in more gurus, but we already know that some of the gurus in the original system were deviating at the time they were voting. So people who are deviating are going to be voting for pure devotees? That also doesn't make any sense. Now there is another important topic that really no one wants to touch from the GBC guru side, and that is that Srila Prabhupada does complain that he is being given poison. At the end of his life here, he was complaining, "My only request is do not torture me and put me to death. Someone is giving me poison." So there's numbers of statements that he made where he indicated that the Guru Cabal, the post-1977 Guru Cabal, was engaged in a nefarious attempt to get rid of Srila Prabhupada. The evidence is very stark and very clear that that is what he was complaining about. And yeah, it is the so-called Ritviks who brought this issue forward. But the Ritviks also brought forward the child molesting issue, the book changes issue, and the poison issue. Because the Ritviks are interested in the important topics that have an effect on the society. You know, we can't be worshiping homosexuals and pedophiles as God's successors. It's just not going to help ISKCON. It's not going to save the world from corruption, because worshiping deviants is corruption by itself. That's just the definition of corruption. Worshipping false idols and false prophets and false gurus. And Prabhupada was against all of the above. He didn't approve of worshiping conditioned souls as gurus. And he gives very dire warnings. The people who worship conditioned souls as gurus will not be liberated, will not go back to Krishna. So they cannot serve Krishna by serving a false prophet. And Prabhupada says false gurus go to the lowest regions of the universe And so do the followers. And that's very understandable. Just look at all the chaos they've caused. Srila Prabhupada says, we need to judge a thing by its result. The result of these false gurus is that ISKCON is discredited, ISKCON is bankrupt, ISKCON has lost the children. The children of the ISKCON society have just abandoned ship. They do not participate. They do not go to the temples. If you go to the ISKCON temples here on the West Coast, you will not find the children there. They are gone. The original Prabhupada disciples are gone. Their children are gone. The temples are ghost towns because the massive devotees have no interest in worshiping illicit sex with men, women, and children. It's just not going to be popular. And some people say that was the plan. They intentionally made the worship of illicit sex with men, women, and children to empty out the temples so they could transform it into a Hindu show bottle of business, which is what it has become. The temples became empty, and then they filled it up to make a Hindu congregation hall. And according to my friend and others, half of those Hindus are eating meat. And a large number of those Hindus are Mayavadis, and they don't understand the Krishna philosophy at all. And a number of those Hindus have pictures of Sai Baba and all kinds of other bogus people like Ramakrishna on their altars at their house because they don't understand the Krishna religion. So that is the result. You got all these hokey people now who have taken over the properties, and they don't understand Prabhupada's aim and object and what he was actually preaching about. Then we have ISKCON's Amogalila jumping in, making a video on this topic, and he starts to quote the May 28th conversation where Prabhupada only appoints Ritviks. He says, in the future, initiations will be conducted by Ritviks when I am not here. That's clearly what's on the tape. But anyway, these guys always mix up the tape and somehow or other conclude that the tape authorizes the worship of illicit sex with men, women, children, homosexuals, pedophiles, drunks, drug addicts, porno swamis, and all kinds of deviants. That is not stated on the May 28th tape. It's not stated anywhere. You're not supposed to worship deviants. That is not authorized anywhere by Prabhupada in any document or any book or any conversation or any statement he ever made anywhere. You don't worship illicit sex deviants who are taking drugs, who are taking Percodon, who are having sex with half-dozen female disciples, who are drinking vodka, who are taking Percodons, who are shooting guns. And shooting guns into the air, and the bullet lands in the neighbor's yard and kills his cow. That's what happened. So we don't worship deviants anywhere. It is not authorized anywhere. And that is really why they're having such a hard time with their case. But if they had taken me to court, this case wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes, and never mind 30 years. I would have just came in and said, guess what? Homosexuals, pedophiles, drunks, deviants, vodka-drinking fools are not, were not, could not have been Krishna's guru successors. End of story. Does this court want to rule in favor of homosexual pedophiles and samadhis? Then go ahead and do that. Okay, they're not going to do that, all right, because they know they're going to look like fools, because the whole argument is foolish. There's no such thing as deviants being Krishna's successors. Krishna is pure, and his successor is also pure. That is the conclusion of the Vedas, and that is not only the conclusion of the Vedas. Ask any hamburger-eating citizen here in San Francisco, are deviants God's successors? Nope, 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 nope. They know that. So, I knew that when I was 10 years old. Deviants, the town drunk, is not, was not, could not have been God's successor. That really comes down to very simple points. Anyway, unfortunately, it cost $20 million on both sides, and it went through all this court hassle, and just went on and on and on and on and on. But the real question is, does Ritvikism win or not win? Yes. Ritvikism means you have to worship a pure devotee. That is the winning argument. That is the only argument. That is the only idea that is acceptable in human society. Human society does not accept worshiping fools, deviants, and debauchees as God's successors. Not acceptable. Now, one of the arguments that they give commonly is, well, there's no deviants currently in the guru chain. We got rid of all the deviants. Well, first of all, there are no deviants in the chain at any time. I mean, it's just ridiculous. There's not too many dog stools in the sweet rice right now. Well, okay. But, sorry, Lokanath Swami is a victimizer of a female child. I know the victim personally. And she had the right to me to make a complaint against Lokanath because the GBC does not take these complaints seriously. So he is, according to this victim, he is a pedophile. So when they say they got rid of all the pedophiles and all the deviants, that is simply incorrect. Lokanath is one of their biggest gurus right now in India. But that begs the question, why are they all in India? Why is Bhakti Vikas and Basu Ghosh and Radhanath and all these guys in India? Because the West has rejected all this stuff. We don't want to have pedophiles and deviants being worshipped as gurus in the West. It's not going to fly over here. But in India, there's all kinds of bogus gurus and swamis and yogis and avatars, so you can make that fly over there. That's why they all went over there. But when they say they got rid of all the deviants, that is simply incorrect, because they have deviants, and not only that, they have the enablers and the orchestrators and the promoters of other people who were deviating for a long, long time, and it took forever to get rid of them. So the enablers and the orchestrators of worshiping deviants are still big leaders. So I'm sorry, but none of this is a pure representation of God's chain of gurus from the spiritual world. This is just, to sum up then, the GBC created a bunch of false gurus, and then they started banning, beating, molesting, suing, and killing people. That is what happened. That is the clear, undeniable evidence of the result of their guru chain from heaven. And that is unacceptable to human society, and that's all there is to it. And we're just glad that this is gradually starting to turn the corner. And we thank the Bangalore devotees very much for making their lawsuit very necessary. We need to discriminate who is Krishna's successor, who is not Krishna's successor, or we will not be pleasing Krishna. And they're giving the example of Bali Maharaj rejecting his guru as an example of how bona fide acharyas in our parampara deviate and have to be rejected. But Bali Maharaj's guru was never listed as an acharya in our system. He was never approved as a pure devotee guru at any time. So they're giving examples of people who were never acharyas in the first place as an example of why acharyas in the parampara are falling down and have to be rejected. But Prabhupada says very clearly, people who are falling down, people who are having deviations, could not have been gurus. So they're just giving false arguments, one after the other. Anyway, I hope this helps. Haribo.